有时候，有一部电影可以把整个电影的历史起来改变。
That's more like it.
库鲁萨瓦的《Seven Samurai》就是这样的一部电影，还有《Ivan the Terrible》，其余的都是平常的电影，像《Herbie Rides Again》、《La Notte》和《Monty Python and the Holy Grail》。
Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we review the movies on our shelves. Every 2 weeks, we'll take a randomly selected movie from our collection, and we'll review it ourselves. I'm Brian Morgan, and as always, joining me is...
Daniel Bergman.
Welcome back, Dan.
Hey, good to be back.
We are talking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail for this episode, as was randomly selected during our Tu Wong Fu episode. So hopefully you took a listen to that and enjoyed it, and you're still with us, and we thank you for that. At point of note, we are now internationally known. This is the first recording we've done since we found out that we have at least one listener in Japan, so a shout out to our listener in Japan if they get this far. They've only downloaded one episode so far.
Yeah, hopefully it's one of those things where it's like, wow, we got somebody from Japan, but then it's probably my cousin, you know, because he lives out there, and it's like, if he's listened to it, great. Maybe he'll tell his friends about it, but at the same time, if it's somebody we don't know, that'll be awesome.
Well, hopefully he did, and hopefully he enjoyed it, so, you know, there's that.
Yeah, but he might be real critical because he's in radio out there in Japan and everything, so he's more into the know about broadcasting and recording and all that, so he might have a little bit more scrutiny.
Well, perhaps he'll give us some feedback so we can improve our recording quality.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
See, there you go. That's the best we can hope for.
Nah, he's a cool guy. Like I said, he's a pretty no nonsense, straightforward. So yeah, if we get advice, it's gonna be like drill sergeant type advice.
Very well. I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how did this movie get on your shelf, Dan?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to ask you, it's like, was there ever a time when this wasn't on your shelf?
That's an interesting question, and I don't have a really good answer. I don't remember when I got it, but I do know that I had it on VHS, and then when I bought a DVD player, I bought it on DVD. So I've had it for at least 25 years, and at least in some way, shape, or form. And long before streaming, I've been able to watch it whenever I wanted to because I knew people that had it. So I would say it's been on my shelf for at least 25 years, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, pretty much go the same with that, because when DVDs first came out, I'm not going to go so far as to say that this was the first, or even among the first handful of DVDs that I bought, but it was close enough to that beginning of my collection that, yeah, I can't remember a time really, other than that short little period when things started rolling when DVDs first came out, that I didn't have this on my shelf, because this is a movie. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you'll agree with that we kind of grew up with. I mean, I remember my brother watching this when I was a wee little lad in elementary school, knowing that what I didn't quite understand what I was watching. I just knew that it was funny. Because, my brother and his friends always laughed at everything, so it's like, okay, if they're laughing, I'm laughing.
So, two things. One, I too didn't buy this with my first handful of DVDs. And in fact, you were with me the day that I bought a DVD player and I bought my first handful of DVDs, if I recall correctly. Because I bought that and a new television, and you had to help me bring the television home.
I vaguely remember that. Did we buy it at Incredible Universe, or was it someplace else?
No, we bought it at the Navy Exchange, but you had the Ford Probe at the time, and you had to help me carry it home because it was a 32-inch Sony Trinitron, which at the time was huge.
Oh, yeah. That was hot stuff back then.
And I couldn't fit it in my car, and you lifted up the hatchback and just left that open and helped me get the darn thing home. So thanks for that, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And the second thing about this movie is it's kind of like a Disney movie in that when you get older and you watch it again, you see things for the satire that they are, but when you're a kid, there's a guy trotting around and another guy behind him with coconuts clapping them together to sound like horse beats or horse hooves. So it's funny on multiple levels, and it's something that you can watch again as a child, and then watch again as an adult and see it with different eyes.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, but this is one of those movies, believe it or not, because I mean most people watch this and just see it's like, oh, it's a silly British comedy, dry humor, and a lot of people will just poo-poo on that and everything. But I mean, to get down to the bare bones, and again, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, I mean, this is a movie that works on so many levels across so many age groups and so many humor levels. I don't want to sound pseudo-intellectual, but this movie is ubiquitous not only to British culture but to American culture as well. Because easily, when I was a young adult and interacting with other adults in the Navy and everything, this was easily the most quoted movie, whether people knew it or not. It's like they would quote this movie and knew that it was something funny and appropriate to the moment, and so to permeate the American culture that much, that's saying something.
When I first came in the Navy, for the first few years, my first and second ships, if you weren't able to quote Monty Python and the Holy Grail on demand at the appropriate moment, you weren't a real sonar tech. It was sort of the standard by which all sonar techs were held. You were, if you couldn't, you were, oh, you're one of those. And if you could, like, come into the fold, you are one of us.
Yeah, that was a test for us as well. If there was a situation and you were able to appropriately use a Monty Python and the Holy Grail quote, that meant you at least got your foot in the door. You were in the club.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we would use it if you were going somewhere, like, oh, don't go there, it's a silly place. Everything was natural about when you used it, and to be perfectly honest, there were some points in my life where I was quoting the movie without actually knowing that I was quoting the movie. Where I'd probably seen it, but it hadn't cemented itself in my psyche yet. So I knew of it, but I would quote it because the people around me were, and I knew when and where to use it, and then rewatched it, and it became more like, that's where I picked that up. Okay, so it put everything together. It really was a growing and learning experience, because I probably shouldn't have been classified a true sonar tech in my younger days, because I didn't recall actually having seen the movie. I just knew when it was appropriate to use it. But that was corrected fairly early on, because we would just sit around and watch movies every now and again, or somebody had a VCR. That's right, I said it, VCR. And we would, watch whatever we had laying around.
That's okay, we know you're old.
Shut your pie hole, you're not that much younger than me. I'm not absolutely certain. I may have this on Laserdisc, but I cannot guarantee that I do, and I cannot guarantee that it works, because I haven't used my Laserdisc player in about 20 years or so. Not since I got a DVD player. Everything's sort of shoveled off to the side there.
I almost bought a Laserdisc player, but that's a story for another session.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to start this conversation with after we got through all this, which is sort of our history with the movie and kind of how it got onto our shelves, is how often I will say lines from this movie, or at least lines that I think are from this movie, and I'll misquote them. Because on the rewatch, I'm like, God, I always screw that one up. Damn it. But it doesn't matter, because people still know where it came from, or at least the people I hang out with.
I would say that because of this movie, I have a language into my own. I will use a line, and it's a very subtle line, but I will use it literally every day. And it's from the King of Castle Bog, and it was a simple, oh bloody hell. And it's, No, it's old bloody hell.
Bloody hell.
You know, and I forget exact scene where but it's just something that happens, and he's like, bloody hell. And basically, I say that every day. Every time there's that subtle little frustration of something that goes wrong and during the day, it could be just dropping my keys or whatever, or finding a rip in my pants, and it's like, oh, bloody hell. Every day, that line is used.
So you would say that this movie, or at least the lines from this movie, are ingrained in your psyche?
Yes. Probably, I will dare say that if the conditions are correct, a line from this movie, if not this one, or the other movie that hopefully we'll talk about some of the time, The Princess Bride, but a line from either of these two movies will probably end up being my last words.
Or etched on my tombstone.
Well, I don't plan on having a tombstone, but
yeah,
again,
me neither.
It's
but
like if I'm lucky enough to die in a deathbed, peacefully surrounded by family, it's like, oh, bloody hell will probably be my last words, something like that. But just kind of to relay another funny story, just to illustrate just how stitched into our lives this movie is, and that my cousin Bill, who lives up north, and I don't know if I mentioned it before in our podcast. I was living with him for a short period, and it was right after dinner. We had a roast chicken, one of those pre-cooked roast chickens you get from the supermarket, and between me, him, and his wife, we basically stripped that thing to the bone. Put it on the kitchen sink. We'll clean up the dishes later. But then later on, I went in the kitchen. I'm like, oh my God, Bill, you gotta check this out. And living in Santa Cruz, I don't know if they have their own indigenous bug species or whatever, but there was a very large and colorful bug in the kitchen on the plate with the chicken bones. And he came in and he's like, oh, what is that? And everything. It's just amazing. We were kind of freaking out a little bit over it because it was unfamiliar and it was large. And of course, Lynn comes in and it's like, what are you guys looking at? And it's like, look at the bug. It's like, what, that little thing? Oh, that couldn't hurt a fly. And I'm like, yeah, but look at the bones. And it's just, again, it's one of those things where I couldn't, if you didn't know this movie, that joke wouldn't have worked. That quote would have just over their heads. No idea. But because it was so stitched into our lives, it worked.
But it's still kind of funny on its face because you have a small bug on the bones and you're saying, look at the bones. I mean, that had to be funny the first time on its very own. So even without knowing the movie, that's still kind of funny. But it's funny in that low level, like, oh, that was kind of amusing, tee-hee-hee kind of way. But when you know the movie and you know the reference, then it becomes a guffaw or a chortle. It's a significant laugh as opposed to, the little titter that you got with just saying it in the first place.
Yeah, but I have seen people who have no idea about this movie, have never seen it, or they know about it but have no intention on seeing it, or they just don't have the right sense of humor. You say a quote that fits a situation perfectly, it would make anyone else who's in this club that we're talking of would just belly laugh to no end. But they look at you like, what are you saying? What does that mean? I don't get it.
You so crazy.
It's frustrating. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, to each his or her own.
True. But this the flip side of this, we're saying how easily quotable this movie is. There is the flip side of the people who quote this movie who aren't quite, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not quite into the movie, but they just quote it anyways, whether they know what they're doing or not.
Oh, like me in my younger years, like I mentioned earlier.
I don't know if it's that bad, because, I mean, you watch the movie and you appreciate it, but then there's these people who've seen it once or whatever, and they don't really think about it. They're not part of it. You can't really call them a fan, but then they see other people doing it, and they're like, oh, yeah, the knights who say, me, me, me. And I'm like, really? That's all you got? What?
Yeah, they catch the big things, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, that brings up an interesting question, because fandoms, some fandoms, tend to be exclusive in that way. Like, oh, you're just a poser, if you will. Like, some Star Trek fans are so exclusive that if you don't know every single episode and every single reference, you can't be a part of their group. I think that for the most part, the groups of people that you and I have chosen to belong to have been much more inclusive in the, I will accept that you are not a tremendous fan, but you appreciate the movie for what it is, and I respect that. You can hang out with the group. It's just when we talk about this, you might be on the fringes, but by the same token, we appreciate what you can bring to the conversation. And I think that's it's an interesting dichotomy between fandoms, because people tend to shun people that don't like things to the same degree that they like them. You see it all the time with sports, where there are people who will go nuts. I mean, remember every single baseball statistic ever, and they look at you like you're a crazy person when you're like, oh, I've heard of Sammy Sosa, or whatever. You know, baseball is just not your thing, or sports just aren't your thing. So, again, where's that line? Where do you draw the line?
It's a good question. I don't think I've ever considered a line when it concerns Monty Python. I mean, I think I've only experienced personally just people who like it, and then people who just dismiss it as being the ultimate geek badge, and therefore don't want anything to do with it. And so it's it's a very binary experience for me. It's because, again, like I said, there's these people who think it's funny and they want to be part of the group, and the only thing they know is the Knights Who Say Neat. Which is like, at first you're thinking, oh yeah, he knows about it and everything, but then you bring up another quote, something that's a little more obscure. It's like, what do you mean, African or European? And they have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know.
So that, and that's the thing. It's a little annoying that, okay, you know one thing, you know the big thing, but you don't know the other nuances or anything. So that's a little annoying. But again, he knows about it and he's willing to quote it in front of everybody. So I don't think he's really crossed a line.
In my opinion, the piece on that is, are they willing to at least participate in the conversation to learn more about the movie? Because that's one of the things that I was kind of concerned about when this movie came up, was it was going to be a quote fest, that we were just going to bandy quotes back and forth, and that's really most people's experience with the movie. And I think I'd spoken to you before we recorded about my concerns and making sure that we had something to talk about that was more than just quoting. But this actually ties into that really well, because this movie is more than just a collection of funny lines that you can quote. There's a tremendous amount of satire in this movie. There's just straight up comedy. And one of the things that you had touched on previously was the dry British comedy. When I was younger, in my preteens, early teens, one of my uncles used to give me a hard time because I had a very dry sense of humor. And a lot of that was because I was exposed to British comedies. And the British sense of humor is dry. That's okay.
That's the thing about British comedy being dry, is that dry tends to last a little longer than if you say the opposite, the wet humor of American pop culture. With the exception of, say, like Airplane, but any type of humor that's topical, say like what's the latest, the Wayans brothers, every time they do like Scary Movie or these other spoofs and everything, it's always in a reference to something that's happening today. In a few years, it's not funny anymore. I mean, like I said, the only exception to that is like Airplane. There was a lot of topical humor about that, but it's still funny today.
Because some of the stuff that's addressed in that is still going on today. Yeah,
which is, I guess, a sad commentary on our society rather than anything else, rather than the humor. But again, that's a conversation for another time. But when it comes to the dry humor of Monty Python, yeah, he talks about politics. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is old woman, man, that one, and they start talking about we're an autonomous, and again, I can't quote it verbatim, but that whole thing about politics. Yeah, he's talking about politics, but it's politics in general.
Here's an interesting piece of trivia about that scene, and it was one of the things while I was watching the movie that I kind of thought about from a 1975 versus 2017. Arthur comes up and says, "Old woman," and the guy, and Dennis, who is who it turns out to be, says, "Man, I'm a man." It kind of goes to that whole thing that people are talking about now. Did you just assume my gender? Oh, it was funny in 1975. That's amusing. And now it's a thing. So it's kind of interesting the way that played out 42 years later. Yes, I just assumed your gender. My bad. And they sort of roll with it, but it was funny. I found it amusing.
Aside from that, like I said, that whole scene, part of the things, again, politics and class. We're still fighting about class. We're still, wondering what the vocabulary ought to be when referring to other people. And it's like, it's like, my name's Dennis. Well, I didn't know that. It's like, you didn't bother to ask, did you? Yeah, it's that kind of applies today. Amazing, isn't it?
One of the things that I found out when I was doing some research for this podcast was that the responses that the peasants gave were straight from philosophers from the Enlightenment in the 1800s, or correction, in the 1700s. Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau, and it was interesting, again, because I didn't know that this was funny on its face, and then when you know where it came from, it makes it even more interesting. It adds to it, it doesn't subtract. The fact that Arthur says, "The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in shimmering..." Samite, thank you. "The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in shimmering samite, gave me Excalibur." Sorry, we won't go through the whole quote. I'm trying not to turn this into a quote fest. So, well, that's no way to form a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from the mandate of the masses, which is exactly what America was built on. The people are the sovereign. Our leaders, from the president to the Congress to the Supreme Court and all the way down, they work for us, not the other way around. But they only do so, and again, it's encapsulated in our two greatest founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, derived from those very same philosophers that are more or less quoted in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That's fascinating. It's really exciting to find that kind of stuff out because of again, don't want to go into politics, but since we're talking about it, because of the current political climate, and everyone says, well, this is the most powerful man on earth, the president, and it's not just President Trump. They've said it for every president. Like, well, that's only because we let him be. And so far it's only been he's, so we let that person be the most powerful person on the planet of a country that...
I didn't vote for him.
Well, I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for him. You don't vote for king. But again, supreme executive power is derived from a mandate from the masses. And since we are recording this over the 4th of July weekend, I think it's ironically appropriate that we talk about this for at least a few minutes, because it is significant, and it's something that we as a country are founded on. Not farcical aquatic ceremonies, but a mandate from the masses.
To add to your commentary there, though, it's also kind of appropriate that our present administration that likes to call itself our leaders, or if he thought he could get away with it, he would probably call himself our king, is thinking that a farcical, watery, aquatic ceremony is appropriate. Because, I mean, during the inauguration, what was the whole thing? It's like, oh, there were plenty of people there, oh, and it wasn't raining.
Hillary Clinton was the lady of the lake. She thrust her arm up out of the
She was
water.
actually throwing a knife at him, but unfortunately he caught it. And that's the thing. And then of course when you tell him, it's like,
funny.
I'm older, you just shut up. And it's like, wow, doesn't that sound familiar? You're fake news. Be quiet. Fake news. Shut up. And of course there's someone like me going, oh, now we see the violence inherent in the system. Help, I'm being repressed.
Don't you see me being repressed?
So, I don't know, Monty Python, accidental genius or what? I don't know.
No, I don't think it's an accident. I think it's sheer brilliance. But that's what makes it timeless. It's relevant in the 70s because there were similar things happening, and then it sort of declined for a while, or at least we didn't talk about it as much, and now we're talking about it again. So, it's not like this wasn't happening, or it went away and came back. It just kind of stayed there, and now we're focusing on it again.
Yeah, as I said, though, timeless is one way to put it. Like I said, the dry sense of humor, dry tends to preserve a little better.
Sorry, that's still funny.
But see, here we are now. We're talking about a scene. We seem to be focusing on a scene that talked about characteristics of human society. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're from. That we can call timeless because despite all the time that went by, we seem to be facing the same problems, asking the same questions, and creating the same problems, I should add. What else about this movie, though, speaks to us across, the generations and the time?
Actually, one of the notes that I took was about the Castle Bog. See this, son? One day all of this will be yours. What? The curtains? No, this. It is an indictment on every generation that parents don't understand their kids. So, again, 1975, you got the king talking to his son, and his son doesn't want to go into the family business. He just wants to sing.
And the parents like, no, stop that.
Yeah, and the other part of that is, how many times have your parents stifled your dream in a way that said, no, that'll never work? And they weren't being...
We really don't want to ride this train right now. We've been through this.
And I mean that in a gentle way to prod that type of answer, but it's not as though other parents aren't doing it. It is sort of a stereotype where, hey, you know what? That's lovely that you have a dream, but you have to be realistic. You have to understand that you can't be a rock and roll star, or you can't be a basketball player, or whatever, because that's part of introducing a little bit of realism into a child's life. Now, let me go on record as saying, I don't want to stifle my children's dreams. I will tell them constantly, whatever you want to do, I will support you. But that doesn't mean that I don't also try to set them up in a way that will put them in a place where they can succeed if X doesn't happen. Kind of the have a backup plan.
Say that you were a pretty progressive parent. Most parents that I knew that when I was growing up were nothing like that. But on the same token, I'd want to be a parent like that as well. Not to stifle my kids in the future, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that.
No, I thought you had it pretty well with the progressive, vice-conservative parenting style. But again, do you agree that this is a stereotype of parenting?
I'd have to say yeah. I mean, if without deeper analysis or anything, but I would say on the surface, definitely. I think again, the dry humor of this movie was able to touch on a lot of aspects of society that they were able to make fun of.
It's a bit of a parody of parenting.
Yeah, this movie not only speaks across the ages, but also across the generations. I think that's why it appeals to so many people, and that's why it still remains as popular as it ever was.
I think that's a fair statement. I
mean, granted, not to the level that Life of Brian did, but it even took a few pokes at religion. Meeting God. What are you doing? I'm gay. I'm averting my gaze. Stop that.
So tired of everyone doing that.
It's just.
All this, I'm
again,
not worthy.
I'm not worthy of this. I'm so depressing. Yeah, and again, to show that nothing was sacred. Yeah, that's the thing I always embraced. Well, I shouldn't say always, but yeah, that I fully embraced when I hit my adult life is that, yeah, there's nothing sacred. Everything is fair game.
There's nothing in this movie that's off limits. I mean, when you're making fun of the bubonic plague, you're probably pretty okay with making fun of everything else.
The other thing I can bring up too is like, this is the thing Monty Python was good at, was poking fun at their own culture. And the scene with the British historian, it was about this time that Arthur and his knights finding that it was difficult to something or other with the French or whatever. And as he's talking, all of a sudden the knight comes by, slashes him in the throat, and just runs away. and turns into a whole crime scene thing, And it's like, to me, it was just like, oh, shut up,
Speaking of things that this movie continues to make fun of, it even makes fun of making movies. From the beginning of the opening credits, you're already into jokes, and it's sort of a satire of all the hullabaloo, all the crap that goes into getting a movie made. You're watching the opening credits, and at the very bottom is the stuff about the moose. And even before that, and I had completely forgot about this, and it surprises me for some reason every single time I see it. The very beginning of the movie starts out as A Day at the Dentist, or now I've forgotten the title because it's going to surprise me next time I watch it and go, what the hell is this? And they go, oh, that's right, I completely forgot about this. As this faux movie comes on, you see a metric crap ton of product placement. This whole thing is sponsored by Dream toothpaste or something like that, and it's everywhere. The little lady walks into the store, it's Dream. I think the only product in that entire store was Dream, D-R-E-E-M, toothpaste. So they're already making fun of the entire concept of movies in the first place, or the entire concept of making movies.
Funny, I don't recall that.
Yeah, it's see, and again, I will watch this, later on, and I will be surprised again by the whole dentist thing. Okay, the movie is actually called Dentist on the Job, and probably one of the reasons I didn't recall it originally is because it's on the special edition DVD, which is the one that I have.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I've got a, they're all special editions practically, but this one's called the Extraordinarily Deluxe Edition. It's a 3-disc, but I don't see anything about a dentist on it. I mean, it's got a very long list of special features on each of the discs.
Yeah, I've got a 2-disc one, so you've probably got it on there. It's just at the very beginning of the movie, and I don't think it's listed as a special feature. But it may only have been on that special edition, in the same way that Disney will market the Diamond Edition, the Platinum Edition, at least 3 different editions that I know of this movie, and that's the Deluxe Edition that I have, the Super Duper Whamadine Deluxe Edition, and then the Blu-ray version, which, if I recall correctly, actually came with a catapult, so you could fling cows at people and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Which is actually a thing that the Romans did when they were fighting other people. It's actually kind of historically accurate.
Yeah, I did read, I don't know if it was the Romans I read, but I know that during siege warfare that they would fling dead animals and dead bodies. It was like an early form of bio-warfare. Like plague victims, they would fling over the walls of the castle hoping to spread the disease.
Yeah, and they would fling poop at them and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of funny that the Holy Grail is more accurate than most movies that tend to be, that they call based on a true story.
One of the interesting points that I heard somebody else talking about this movie say was that in the great list of movies about the King Arthur story, this is actually the best one. I mean, there have been how many different versions of King Arthur. I know one just came out earlier this year and it bombed at the box office.
Most have.
Yeah, and there were several before that. I think the only King Arthur movie that I really, really cared for as a King Arthur movie was Excalibur.
I was about to say, yep, Excalibur is the one that comes to mind as well.
Yeah, everything else was like, oh, that was a movie about King Arthur, I guess. You took some creative liberties with that, didn't you?
Are you talking about Excalibur taking creative liberties, or just all the other ones that came out?
All the other ones.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So them was fighting words there for a second.
No. I liked Excalibur. I remember watching that as a child on whatever the name of the movie channel was that we had.
Oh, you really want to show the age? It's like, the movie channels back in my day was the two competing ones was On TV and Select TV.
We had HBO when I was a kid.
Well, this is predating HBO.
Oh. I remember we had HBO, and HBO would come on from 3 until 11, and then on weekends it would start at noon. And then we only had one cable company in my hometown because it was very small. And HBO went away, and we had Spotlight, was what it was called. And we cycled through a bunch of different ones, and then ultimately we came back to HBO, and then Showtime came out, and Cinemax, and all that kind of stuff. So it really was, this is what you got, and we had, maybe 20 channels or whatnot. So we were stuck with what was available, and there were no other options. Sadness.
Yeah. Well, I think it's appropriate to go down this memory lane, because actually I think the first time I saw Monty Python and the Holy Grail was on that movie channel, Select TV. And it was like my aunt, my brother's younger sister, got it for us. She got us a year's subscription for Christmas. And it was like you plug it in. It was like the old video game systems. You plug it into the old UHF screws in the back of the television, and it had a special antenna. But yeah, you put it back in there, and you turn to channel 3, and you flip the switch, and behold, now you have premium movies or anything. And I remember Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I watched with my brother, and like I said, I had absolutely zero idea what the hell it was I was watching.
That's probably where I saw it for the first time, too. And I remember one of the things that you could do with the set-top box that we had, it was an actual channel dial, and if you wangled the dial just so and got it locked in between channels 20 and 21, you could decrypt HBO and whatever the channel was next to it. Not that we ever did that as kids, but if you took a matchbook cover and tore it off and sort of shoved it in there, it would keep it locked in place, and you could probably watch HBO successfully for a good couple of hours, at least long enough to watch a movie. Kids, don't try this at home.
Yeah, hey kids, what are you doing listening to this anyways? This is explicit. No, you reminded me again, going a little off subject, about, it's like how desirable a station was if you can watch it distorted. It was always that scrambled channel that you would watch. And I'm not going to say exactly what it is, because we all know what it was.
I would never do that. I don't know what you're talking about. One of the other things that I found about this movie that's pertinent, bringing it back to the movie, or rather is still pertinent in this day and age, is the metaphor of the Black Knight.
Go on.
Arthur comes upon the Black Knight. He says, "You shall not pass." Or, maybe he's a Gandalf throwing a thing in there saying, "None shall pass." But whatever, that's fine. Not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg. But he says he needs to get by, and he says, "We're going to fight." They fight. Arthur wins. The Black Knight has no arms and no legs, and yet he's still not accepting that he lost the fight. Which reminded me of a number of conversations that I have had on Facebook, a number of conversations that I have had with people in real life, where even when you prove your point and you're right, and I will say, it's not a matter of being right so much as ensuring that the right information is out there, but that's tangential to the point I'm trying to make. The whole thing reminds me of that meme that people put out every now and again, talking about playing chess with pigeons. it doesn't matter who wins or loses. The pigeon is still going to knock all the pieces down and strut around like it won anyway. And that's the whole scene with the Black Knight, is a statement about people who just can't seem to realize that you, and we're already going to have the explicit tag on here, but all the people who just can't realize you fucking lost. Okay, you're wrong. And again, it's not a matter of proving whether or not I'm right. I just want to make sure the right information is out there, which goes to the Facebook conversations and the real life conversations. I'm sure that you know people like that.
Oh, I know too many people like that. But aside from that, on the flip side, and forgive me if this sounds a little like self-help preachy, but this scene has really helped me to develop into a better person. And in that, I've learned that, it's okay to admit when I'm wrong. It's okay to admit when I've been bested. And what this scene did for me is it gave me, again, the most quoted movie. It gave me a really humorous out when it comes to, okay, this person presented an argument that is valid, and I really don't have any response for that, so he wins. But I'll just say, all right, we'll call it a draw.
But you have to say it like that.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have the right delivery.
You gotta have the right delivery, and it helps if the person that you're having this conversation / argument with is in the know. And if that person, he or she knows, then, it becomes a big laugh and everybody's still friends, It's like, and to me, that's a beautiful thing. I mean,
Exactly.
I will say that is definitely one thing about this movie that's really helped my life along, is that just being able to say that when I'm wrong and do it with a sense of humor.
And that's appropriate. I mean, I'm reasonably certain that many people have adopted that philosophy, but I'm sure that the creators would be happy that it is being used in that manner.
And in a tangent subject to that, too, I'll always say it's just a flesh wound when, in my line of work, which, in case a lot of listeners, if you're just joining this podcast or anything, I'm a paramedic. I've been so for over 10 years. I've been with EMS for 16 years, but, I've had a paramedic. Anyways, that's not important. Get on with it! Yes, okay, getting on with it.
Skip a bit, brother. Skip a bit.
Oh. There have been plenty of times when I'll roll up on somebody who is bleeding profusely from whatever mechanism of injury. But, sense of humor in a time like that is essential, and I'll just look at them and it's like, that's a flesh wound. And about 50% of the people I say that to laugh. And it helps. Yeah, Monty Python out there, man, saving lives.
And they do say laughter is the best medicine.
I believe it.
Well, it releases natural endorphins, so they say.
As I say, it's releases endorphins, dilates the blood vessels, increases respiratory and cardiac rate, and has an overall positive response to the immune system.
So you're a paramedic. Just kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about exposing people to this movie. When my entire in-law family came down, was it earlier this year or last? It was last year. My mother and father-in-law came down. My brother-in-law came down with his kids. We actually all sat down and watched this movie because my in-laws are big fans as well. Maybe not to the degree that I am, but they're fans. And my brother-in-law said, oh, well, my kids have never seen this. Actually, I felt like I was a bad parent because I realized that my kids hadn't seen it either. So we all sat down and watched it as a family. And my nephew was entranced with the movie, and he was 10. So he thought it was funny because there was a guy clopping coconut shells together, and he sort of understood the bird reference, Africa, or the swallow can't carry a coconut and all that kind of stuff.
Are you suggesting coconuts migrated?
Are you suggesting coconuts are migratory? Well, it's not a matter of way grips it, man. It's a matter of weight ratios. A 5-ounce bird cannot carry a 1-pound coconut. Well, perhaps 2 swallows in tandem. Anyway. See, and now it's turning into what I'd feared, but that's okay. We've been pretty good about it so far. We can manage ourselves.
No, stop that. Won't be doing this. It can't be helped. We knew the job was dangerous when we took it.
Exactly. He enjoyed the outlandish humor, but I would be interested in following up with him some years down the line to see if he catches some of the stuff that we're talking about as well. The good thing is he had a good time, and he enjoyed the movie, and he was really amused by the coconuts.
Yeah, I find that most people who I show this movie to for the first time end up enjoying it on some level, as you described. It's especially joyful to me when you get these people who haven't seen it because what they've heard, quote unquote. Oh, it's a nerdy movie. It's dry humor. I'm not going to get it. But when I'm able to convince them to sit down and watch this movie, and within 10, 15 minutes of the start, they're laughing their asses off. And to me, it doesn't matter at what. I mean, if it's the simple thing of the coconuts, or they really get the humor, or they get the references.
Yeah, or the fact that they started the credits and started talking about moose bites and coming to Sweden, Swedish tourism, and
and the whoever got sacked, and it's like, well, the people in charge of the credits have been sacked.
Yeah, and the people in charge of sacking the people who were in charge of the credits have been sacked. Oh, wait, now we've got new credits, and instead of talking about moose, they're talking about llamas. That's, again, kind of goes to what I was talking about before. The jokes start, right off the bat in this movie.
The biggest joy I get is when the most skeptical of people enjoy this. I find that at least 80-85% of everybody who I show this movie to winds up throwing a quote at me sometime in the near future after watching this movie.
Because now they're in with the in crowd.
Of course, I guess the funniest one was that during a training course when we were talking about proof, using medical tests to prove a certain thing. It's like, well, how do we prove that she's such and such or whatever? And somebody in the background yelled, "Well, build a bridge out of her!" And it's so funny because the instructor had no idea what we were talking about, but a handful of us were laughing.
Here, watch this. It's funny because I was actually getting ready to start talking about that scene because I was curious what you got out of that scene, since we've been talking so much about what things mean in sort of a metaphoric sense. Does this scene mean anything to you, metaphorically speaking?
So what I got out of the scene is, we said that this movie's poking fun at certain aspects of our society. I dare say Western culture, because I don't know, if it really touched on anything from Eastern cultures or other cultures other than Western. But it's definitely poked fun at the thing that today we are wondering, why is this still an issue? And that's just the outright refusal to acknowledge facts and scientific proof. I think, the whole thing about, what sort of evidence, do we present to prove that she's not a witch? And, everybody was struggling with it, and they come up with these absurd ideas. It's like, what floats on water? It's like a duck. Oh, she weighs more than a duck, then she's a witch, Oh, no, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Well, if she weighs less than a duck, or the same as a duck, then she's a witch. And, of course, it, oh, well, there's a scientific proof that we need because it fits our ideologies. Burn the witch!
True.
Yeah, and it's to quote another prominent English comedian, it's like John Oliver, why is this still a thing? Yeah, so, that's what I got out of that scene.
Well, the whole thing is based on Socratic method, asking questions to get to an answer. The knight who was trying to discern whether or not she was a witch or what their conclusions were based on just asked questions. All he did was ask questions. He never said anything definitive. It was just trying to get them to justify their position.
True.
The absurd thing is they justified their position that she was a witch. She's a witch.
With absurdities.
Yes.
If we had to do like a breakdown of what certain scenes make fun of, it's like we talked earlier about Castle Bog, and it's poking fun that parents don't understand their kids. But then on the other side of that is this, the absurd drive for money and status, where it's like they killed the whole wedding party. Well, first he was prepared to marry his son off to somebody he didn't love, because she had huge tracts of land. But then beyond that, it's just like, it's like after the whole wedding party was killed and everything, it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to see her as my own daughter, very legally binding. It's just all that greed, it's like it made fun of that.
Well, one of the things that made me laugh was when Lancelot comes in and he kills as you said, the wedding party, and he kills all of the guards, the king comes in and says, "Are you the one that killed all the guards?" Well, yeah, but I thought that it... there was a 50 pounds apiece, those guards. Like, never mind the fact that they're dead, that's 50 pounds.
Those are expensive.
Yes, the fixation with money.
So then, continuing on what each scene is making fun of, I mean, would you say that the scene with the holy hand grenade, would that be poking fun at the overuse of military power?
To a degree, perhaps, because it was definitely overkill, a grenade to kill a bunny.
Granted, the bunny was dynamite.
Yeah, but in their defense, that was the most vicious rodent you ever laid eyes on. I think it was more of a poke at utilizing religious icons as a means to destroy something.
Fair assessment.
Bless this thy hand grenade, that with it we might blow thine enemies to tiny bits in thy mercy. Amen. Which, again, going to our shared military experiences, how many military ceremonies, or even prior to, start with a prayer?
In my book, a little bit too many. And I'm not saying that people aren't entitled to their religious beliefs or anything, don't get me wrong. I just always found it kind of hypocritical that, here you are using a so-called religion of peace to ask God to favor you so you can kill other believers. Because they're either not believing the way they should be, or they're believing the wrong God, or whatever, but I don't know, it never sat well with me. So, that said, I think, yeah, it's a fair assessment about poking fun of that military establishment of mixing religion and warfare.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with your assessment of requesting the blessing because somebody believes in a different God than you. I've always looked at it as more of a, please, justify our actions as right, regardless of what the other person believed. Now,
well, that's a nice way. I mean, at the risk of delving into too deep a geopolitical and religious discussion on this and everything, but I mean, this whole, what on the surface we call it a war on terror, but in actuality, right now, it's a war against Islam or Islamic believers, because I've heard, even way back when Desert Storm and Desert Shield, it was there was a lot of rhetoric that I had heard about, smiting these non-believers or these heathens, or, I heard the vocabulary.
I'm inclined to believe that was the minority during that time.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying it was the majority, but it was there. And that like I said, that didn't sit well with me.
Okay, fair enough. Again, I'm more inclined to go along with the idea that the majority is X and that a very small minority is Y. That doesn't make Y right in their thoughts, but it does make it a very small minority.
Well, that's the thing, though. It's like the minority never bothered me because they're a minority. It's the majority that never said anything about it, even though, it's like they supposedly share the belief and everything, and they just sort of let it go. But that's neither here nor there in this conversation. So
yeah, I think we are definitely starting to get a little off topic.
Just a little bit.
But again, it does go back to at least the point that we were making originally, was the mix of religion and warfare as a concept. The other aspect of religion that is poked fun of in this movie is when the monks are walking by, Dominus Requiem. And then pounding their head with the boards. That is a complete and total poke at the religious dogma of doing some sort of self-flagellation, in worship of your God, or doing something just because that was the religious dictate, or the way you're supposed to do things. At least that's my opinion.
So here comes another question as to far as what certain scenes mean. Castle Anthrax, what was that poking fun at?
I would like to hear your answer first.
To be honest, I don't know if I have a good answer. I mean, I just think it was just a way to throw in some sexy jokes.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. I mean, there was a little bit, if you're familiar with the Arthur legend, Galahad was the pure of heart and deeply...
the chaste.
Yeah, the chaste and devout knight. And to see him put in that position where he's in dire peril... No, the peril is too great. No, I can handle it. You know, to see
You're gay.
to see him
I'm not.
to see him I don't want to say laid low, but sorely tempted in that way, and it's only through the actions of his brethren knight that he's saved from the temptation. You could probably make a compelling case to going through life and realizing that you could make a stupid decision if it weren't for somebody pulling you out of it and bringing you along back to where you're supposed to be or where they think you should be.
Interesting.
And there were sexy jokes. And there were the
sexy
spankings.
Jokes. And then the oral sex.
Well, perhaps I could stay for a bit.
Yeah, kind of looking back too. Remember, I said I watched the first time I watched this with my brother, and again, wee little elementary school age child. What's that mean? Nothing. You'll learn when you're older.
Move along.
So now that we've been discussing these, and this is not in my notes, I had no premeditated desire to bring about this thought. This sort of just popped in my head right now. And let's go through it to see if this holds water. Are each of these scenes and each of these trials, could we relate them to the 7 deadly sins? Because I'm thinking Castle Anthrax is lust.
Okay.
We talked about Castle Bog, greed.
Okay.
Wrath is the Dark Knight.
The Black Knight.
You think the Black Knight or the Holy Hand Grenade?
Oh, good question. I would say the Black Knight if I had to make a call.
Okay. What's another seven of the 7 deadly? Sloth.
And that's where I think I was starting to wonder where this started to fall apart a little bit, because I don't know which one I would pick as sloth. Perhaps Prince Herbert could be sloth, because he didn't really want to do anything except sing.
That's a good one.
So we've covered lust. Well, which one's pride? Oh, pride would actually be well described by the knights.
Well, that could be the Black Knight too.
Yeah.
The Black Knight always wins.
Yes, that could be pride. And then wrath would be going to what you had said earlier, the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch, unless I misunderstood you. I don't think I did.
No, I think that.
Envy?
Their dealings with the French.
No, I think that's a stretch.
I don't know. Now, like I said, this is right now. If you're listening to this podcast, this is the birth of a fan theory. It could die at childbirth, or it might grow.
Like they did in medieval times, in the times of Arthur. So again, strangely appropriate.
It'll be interesting if this gets published and we start to see this on Reddit. Say Monty Python was the 7 deadly sins all along, and we never saw it.
Yeah, exactly.
But hey, let this podcast. I was the first.
let's call the boys from the troop.
It's an interesting thing to think about.
It is. I think it starts to fall apart when you get to some of the more, I don't want to say subtle. I guess when you get to some of the other ones, you can get through 5. I mean, again, there's a reasonably compelling case to be made for the 5 that we covered.
Let's see. We didn't cover gluttony and envy. Oh, we tried to cover envy, but we didn't cover gluttony. That could have been the scene in Camelot, because there was a lot of partying going on there.
That could be gluttony. That was kind of a big party.
Yeah.
Perhaps, and this is a bit of a stretch, the scene that is the constitutional peasants could be a bit of envy. Or you could discuss...
Yeah, that is a bit of a stretch. I'd like to make that work, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I can. It just sort of popped into my head. Again, it's the birth pangs of a fan theory. But another one could be why they wanted to call the lady a witch in the first place, because perhaps she had some thing that they didn't, and they envied her for it, so they tried to kill her reputation and call her a witch.
Yeah, that one might be a little bit of a stretch too. But
look, I'm trying, okay?
Hey, no. I appreciate that, because like I said, this just popped into my head, and it's like, the Castle Anthrax. I'm like, wow, that's lust, and then we talked about greed. It has a few parts, but it may not entirely hold water. But it'd be interesting to see if we get any fans that comment on that.
Yeah, I guess the only other part that may make sense for Envy was, and I think you actually said it first, so I'm just building off of that, was the French already having a Grail, and they attack mindlessly because they're envious that they have a Grail. But again,
Yes.
I think that might be a bit of a stretch.
Closer than the other one, so.
Well, again, you got to work these things out.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about that attack scene was they only had about 75 extras for King Arthur's army, and they would just shoot from one side and then shoot from the other side, so it looked like they had a lot more. Most of the extras in that scene were tourists that just happened to be there on the day that they were filming, and they said, "Hey, you guys want to be in a movie?"
Oh, talk about luck.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, can you imagine just being that person?
I was in the movie.
I'm one of those.
That's me.
Where was that shot? Do we know
It
that?
was filmed at a castle in Scotland, and I do not remember the name.
Oh, okay, but in Scotland, basically.
In fact, all of the movie was filmed in Scotland. Yeah, actually, according to the internet, they only were able to shoot at 2 privately owned castles, and all of the castle interiors were from one castle. And as I mentioned earlier, they were all in Scotland. One was by Glasgow. I've been there. I can't remember how to pronounce it. And the other was on the west coast of Scotland somewhere. Which makes me sad. I was actually in Scotland in 2008.
Well, now we have future tourist destinations.
Yeah, we'll put that on the list.
We'll have to go see the castles where Monty Python and the Holy Grail were filmed.
Yes, put it on your bucket list. So, one more thing before we start to wrap this up, and it kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier and some of the things we have been talking about, and that's quotes from the movie. So we talked about some of the more popular situations in which you might use quotes from the movie. It's just a flesh wound, as you had used earlier. How many other quotes that are not necessarily situational have you used just to catch people off guard? For example, I have, for no reason whatsoever, been at that pregnant pause in a conversation, or telling someone I wanted them to go do something, and then at the very end I said, "And I need you to chop down the largest tree in the forest with a herring!" Things like that.
I don't know if I can answer that honestly. I don't know if there's situations where I do that often. Like I said, every day I will use at least one quote from the movie, and that one's a very subtle one. I will say in my time in the Navy, when I was on USS Pogey, and you know what field day is.
Mm-hmm.
To people who don't quite know what that is, field day was a particular time, usually 1 or 2 hours, set aside where everybody got up and did some cleaning. Some captains, I had 3 different captains on the boat, and each one had a varying level of obsession when it came to cleaning stuff. And we had one captain who was absolutely obsessed with it. It's like everything needed to be cleaned.
A clean ship is a happy ship.
Yeah, but a ship cleaning isn't very happy at all. That said, it always felt unreasonable to us lower down ranks. Everybody cleans, so we used to make fun. It's like, yes, we are the chiefs who say, clean, clean, clean. And it's like, we expect you to clean the entire engine room with a dirty sponge. And it became a thing. And next thing I know, I wouldn't say everybody, but a good handful of my shipmates were using that for a short time, and it always brought a laugh. And I didn't mind that my joke was stolen, but it's like it was shared. I appreciate it.
Well, isn't the most sincere form of flattery imitation?
That's what they keep telling me. So.
Or plagiarism. One of the two.
Yeah, there are a lot. I can't think of any at the moment off the top of my head, but yeah, there are a lot of times when I will throw a Monty Python quote from this movie at people, and a lot of times it does go over people's heads, and I don't want to say wasted, but, it makes me laugh.
Well, as long as you're happy, Dan.
Oh, yeah. That's all that counts. Screw everybody else.
And here's, I guess, more examples of doing this. I liked your example because it takes the quote, or it takes that section of the movie and modifies it for the situation. So you probably do it, I'm just guessing, you probably do it more than you actually know.
Oh, I'm certain of it.
Okay. But sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, especially if you're talking about this movie, which, I mean, we are now, we've hit some of the big quotes, but I was having a conversation with another friend of mine about this movie, and he said some things that I didn't remember. He was talking about the moose bites, and it was one of those things like, oh, that is in there. That's right. Because I think we all have our little favorite chunks that we like to draw from, like you, and it's just a flesh wound and things like that. That's part of the fun of this movie, is when someone says something and you don't necessarily get it, you're like, oh, that is from there. You're right. I'm sorry. My bad. I totally missed that. And then you can have that shared laugh. It's not like you had to explain the joke. That actually happens to me on occasion. As I said earlier, and this kind of brings it back to the beginning so we can bring it around to the end, I misquote this movie all the time. And even when you watch it and you're anticipating that line, I'll say it and go, oh, well, damn it. Now I'm sad because I messed it up. And I will probably do it again in the future because it's already built into my memory that this is the way that line goes. Because when you say, look at the bones, I always want to say, look at the bones, man. But he doesn't say that. I don't know why. I put it in there, but I did, and it still works. Because the people who know still know.
Yeah, I think true fans are forgiving in that. Talking about how things that how this movie affects our lives, or just how it's always there. Just one little unrelated story. One day at work, we were driving down the Hollywood freeway, heading back to our station. There's a hotel in Hollywood called the Hotel Argyle, and at night you can see in bright white neon sign Hotel Argyle. One night driving by, some of the neon had broken. So all you had was the Hotel Arg. ARG.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, and tell you, man, I mean, talk about acting quickly. Getting that phone, getting it set to the camera. I got a picture of it. Granted, I had to zoom in on it and edit it and everything. And I posted on Facebook. I think it's still in the album somewhere. But, you know, if you get this, you're going to laugh. And amazingly, there were a number of people who got it, you know. It's like, some people, I think somebody asked, is like, is that anywhere near the castle? You know, it's like,
you know, one of the things I like about that, though, is you could find someone caught the reference that you didn't know liked the movie beforehand. And it gives you that new respect, if you will, for that person. Like, oh, I didn't know. Look, another thing we have in common.
Yeah, he gets it. Yeah.
But she was my best friend. Oh, wait, wrong Monty Python thing.
No.
Mrs. Nickelberry's exploded. Don't be so sentimental, Mother. People explode every day. But she was my best friend. And that's the other thing about this movie is usually people who are really good fans of it, they launch into other Monty Python skits.
Oh, yeah. Oh, if ever there was a gateway drug, Monty Python, the Holy Grail, is the gateway drug to all of the British humor. Okay, because you'll find yourself referencing other Monty Python movies, and then you'll think Benny Hill and Red Dwarf and you know, whatever else comes up.
Yes.
Monty Python, the Holy Grail, the gateway drug.
I'd never considered it like that before, but that's a good point. So, did you have anything else you wanted to say, or should we move on to where this fits on your shelf?
You know, in another story before we wrap this up, one of my other favorite lines, or rather it's a reoccurring line, is Arthur's propensity to say 5 instead of 3. And he'll always go 1, 2, 5, 3, so 3. I must say that you really have to be careful where you use that and with whom you use it.
I sense a story coming.
Oh yeah, there was a story, and it could have turned bad, and that's where I really learned to. And it was about medication administration, and it was like, yeah, just give him 3 milligrams, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, no more, no less, and everything. And I go, okay, I'm going to give him 5, and it's like, what? Like 3. You know, it's like, and that's the thing. I mean, if I was telling somebody else to give, you know, I could have overdosed
my
this
bad.
person. You know, granted, it was me giving the drugs, but I mean, if it was the other way around and I said 5, he would have pushed 5.
True.
You know,
You definitely
like,
have to be careful when and where
So,
you use that.
You have to be careful, but it's still funny. 1, 2, 5, 3, so 3.
not to pick apart the movie, but because he counted 4 individual counts, he actually counted to 4, so the grenade should have blown up in his hand, maybe? Or blown up in midair?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that one. I caught that a long time ago, too, but I was just like, yeah, whatever.
It's fine.
Let it go.
It'll be okay. 1, 2, 5, 3 load. I've used that one an awful lot as well, counting to 3 about many, many wonderful things. I don't recall specifically, and I'm not going to relate a story because it's sufficient to say I've had that experience. Maybe not in a life or death situation. So I applaud you for correcting yourself on the spot. Good job. Did the patient live?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. Good. Hey, listeners, Dan didn't kill somebody by accident. while trying to make a joke. Damn it.
That's the thing, too. It's like, if only that person knew just how close to death he came.
One of life's little quirks. Who knew?
Yeah, and he'll never know.
Yeah, well, unless it's a listener. We could get famous.
Yeah. So, what edition do you have?
I have the special edition.
It's just called Special Edition?
We spoke about this before. It's just called Special Edition.
Oh, okay. And I think, as I mentioned before, the edition I got was called the Extraordinarily Deluxe Edition. It's a very beautiful edition. I'm not a fan of the color gold, but it works for this because, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it's about absurdity. So to put it in a gold framework and a lot of the metallic foiling on the cardboard cover looks really nice. Nice little addition to have on the shelf.
Does yours have the Shakespeare subtitles if you don't want to pay attention to the movie?
I don't know. Because it's, as far as the special features, now I said this was a 3-disc edition. Apparently, disc 3 is a CD. It has the soundtrack. Was
it after they were forced to eat Robin's minstrels, which again is a thing that I say often?
What? You lost me.
You said it has the soundtrack, and I was trying to think how many songs are in the movie, and the only songs I can think of are Robin's Minstrels. Brave, brave Sir Robin bravely ran away. I did not! I never did! And then they go through the whole march for over a year with the animated sequence, and they go through spring, summer, and they were forced to eat Robin's Minstrels.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yay. I say that all the time, too. And there was much rejoicing. Yay.
Yes, I do say that as well. That's another one that comes up quite often. Yeah, it's a 3-disc edition. 2 of them are DVD. One's a CD, which has the soundtrack. I guess they even have a track that talks about Sir Spamalot, the stage play that is based on the Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I don't think mine has that.
Yeah, and a lot of commentary and a lot of other absurd little bits and pieces. So a good edition if you really like a lot of stuff to look at other than the movie.
Cool. Does it have the Lego stop-motion film of the Camelot scene?
I don't think so. I think that came out relatively recently. So this is an older edition that came out quite some time ago. Like I said, I've had this for a very long time, so I don't think that's on there.
Well, I know it definitely wasn't on my VHS copy back in the day, which is why I do love DVDs for the special features.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whether I watch them or not, I love the fact that they're there, and I can go back and look at them anytime I want. Yeah, I watched the Lego movie. It was just that one scene, and there are other Lego recreations on YouTube. If any listeners are interested, we could probably post some links on our Facebook page.
Oh, wait, hold on, time out. I am corrected. My eyes finally focused. It does have the Knights of the Round Table in Lego.
Yay!
It's on this edition, so I stand corrected.
I'm a huge fan of Lego stop-motion movies, especially well-made ones. I actually tinkered around with it for a little while and had about a 3-second animation, which you would be... Well, maybe you wouldn't be, but surprisingly, it took a heck of a lot longer than I thought it was going to take to make the little movie. And it was Luke Skywalker fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi, just for shits and giggles, baby, shits and giggles.
Yeah, and there was much rejoicing.
Yay! Now, for our listeners, we've mentioned this before. Dan and I do this over a video call, so Dan had his fingers waving in the air like the little flags in the scene, and it actually made it even funnier. So
yeah, if this ever evolves into a vlog, then maybe we'll see that sometime.
So, anything else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, like I said, it's a beautiful addition. However, it still occupies general population status. It still has a special place in my heart. Although I do list it under M for Monty Python, so I do that for the sole reason that I can group all the Monty Python movies together that I have. I have 3: Life of Brian and Meaning of Life with this. So they're not separated. I like to keep them together. That's just how I roll in my collection.
He's not the savior. He's a very naughty boy.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that movie sometime.
We'll put it on the list because I don't actually own that one. This is the only Monty Python movie I own. I do have a couple of books that have all of the Monty Python skits, all the words to them, and the songs. And I care a great deal for the Galaxy song. Just remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving and revolving at 900 miles an hour. The math is surprisingly accurate for a simple song.
Reasonably. Yeah, the funny thing is my favorite Monty Python song is from Life of Brian, always look on the bright side of life, but, it's a classic.
I find that amusing given your generally slightly cynical nature.
It's a cynical song.
True. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I won't sing. Sorry, I've already tortured the people enough. Again, this being the only Monty Python movie that I own doesn't diminish the other movies. I just haven't picked them up yet.
Well, get on that.
Yes, sir.
Get on with it.
Get on with it.
I want you to have the same 5 I have. 3.
For me, while, again, this movie is in general population, I would rank this movie as a top shelf movie. It's still comedically relevant. It's still funny. And if I didn't quote it as much as I do, I could justify moving it down. But because I use quotes often, it must mean something to me. So, therefore, I will use that as a rationale to put it on the top shelf.
That's a good rationale.
Okay, so moving on. We don't have any listener comments or feedback. So we'll move on to clicking the random magic movie button. Alright, and our next movie is...
Cars.
Again, I would like to reiterate to our listeners that this is random. It is sheer coincidence that Cars 3 is currently in theaters. So don't judge us. It is random. I promise you, it's random. So, if you want to contact us and raise questions about the potential non-randomness of the movies, we'll be happy to discuss it. I guarantee that they're random, but you can do that on our Facebook page, facebook.com/We'll Review It Our Shelves. You can do it from our Podbean page, which is willreviewit.podbean.com. You can email us at wrios2016mr@gmail.com. You can leave comments on the YouTube, which we are now on YouTube if you're following us on Facebook. I think those are all of the ways you can contact us. You can leave us a review on iTunes, or you can review us on the Google Play. We look forward to hearing from you, and I think with that, we will bid you adieu. Can't you tell I am French from my outrageous accent? Dan?
Death awaits you all, huge giant teeth.
Thanks for listening, and have a great day.